The ancient Near East, also referred to as Mesopotamia, has had many great artifacts found in its time, from the invention of the first writing system, cuneiform, to registers upon registers about war. This specific fertility sculpture or figure dates back to around 7000 to 3000 BC. People of this time favored and valued women. It was a matriarchal society. The figure is clearly a woman because it has large breasts, which is a great sign of fertility. Women were valued because of their ability to bear children. There is no face, simply to highlight the fertility aspects of the body, and the bands of pigments on the arms and legs suggest a full roundedness of the figure, which represents beauty and fertility because it was the most favorable body type at the time. Right here we can see these sculptures that are guarding an entrance. This was very popular in Egyptian times to have different sculptures or creatures guarding the doors to scare predators from entering. Egypt's society was founded upon hierarchy, and they had pretty strict social class roles. And so the richer you were and the more divine you were, the larger you were portrayed. And here we can see these small figures, which were probably made by poorer people, and thus they are smaller in size to show their less prominence or dominance in the social classes. Art was meant to be seen for the divine, so they were often painted in brightly rich colors that would kind of facilitate the ruler's transition into the afterlife or the divine realm. Hieroglyphics were often used as captions to help tell stories. See here with the sarcophagus that there are paintings in the forms of registers, which was often very popular to help tell stories, and everything was painted in brightly rich colors, which colors had different representations for ties with the gods. And so we can see reds and blues and other golds and whites. And also this is totally frontal. This artwork was meant to be seen from the front so the gods can see them. Mummification and preserving rulers was very important in this time, and thus sarcophaguses were very popular in order to wrap the body and preserve it to help the soul make it, or the Ka make its transition to the afterlife. Right here we have a Koros, which was a statue of a young man which portrayed the ideal figure of the person who the statue was being made. It was often used as a grave marker or a sign of bravery for a young man who has passed. This gave rise to naturalism and the idea of an ideal body form. And we can see later figures that have contrapposto, which was the way the body was bent in order to make it look as natural and realistic as possible. It would tilt the body axes so that it would just look as natural as possible. And these statues were often life-size, made of marble, and always nude. Greek artists used a black figuring technique for their vases, which was very difficult because of the exact temperatures that the kiln had to be fired for, and the artists had to maintain these temperatures in order to create these distinct black figures on the vases. Here we can see that there was exactly no negative space. Every inch of this vase is filled with something, and there are geometric patterns which were often very popular, and there were depictions of animals. The red pottery was very popular, and then to have these black figures drawn onto them was, kind of standard for the pottery made at this time. And we can really see the fine craftsmanship that this artist had done for this vase. Usually the pottery has depictions of gods or tells stories, and we can kind of see that here with this vase. And the artist had to paint on all of these figures and scenes by hand, fire them in order for them to appear this way. And it's just very amazing how they were able to achieve this without having any kind of technology at all. The Romans actually copied a lot of the Greeks' techniques to making art, and that's why some of their artworks look so similar. But we can see here on this sarcophagus that it is kind of made in the Hellenistic way of art, and the faces are very dramatic, and the scene, there's people everywhere and they're kind of entwined between each other, and it's showing the drama. You can see that in their faces, which is a very distinct difference from kind of classical Greek sculptures to this Hellenistic style. Here we have a bust of an older man, and it was made using the Veristic art style, which emphasizes hyperrealism in its sculptures. So naturally occurring features are going to be exaggerated in order to show wisdom. So we can see the wrinkles in the forehead and around the mouth are deeply sunken in, and the nose is kind of enlarged in order to show wisdom, because this art form wanted to emphasize older men because they were the typical ideals of wisdom. Byzantine art is almost entirely concerned with religious expression, so artists often wanted to translate church theology into artistic terms. So Byzantine architecture and paintings remained uniform and anonymous. Very little sculptures were made during this time. One of the most popular forms of Byzantine art were the mosaics that decorated the walls and domes of the churches. Iconoclastism, the destruction campaign against images and those who believed in them, came to a halt. The revival of religious art that followed, based completely on clearly formulated principles, images were accepted and valued not for worship, but as channels through which the faithful could direct their prayers. So here we have a sculpture of a religious figure, and we can clearly tell that by his beard and the crown he's wearing and what he's holding. His clothing and drapery kind of suggest his divinity over others, so we can tell that he is a religious figure, and this was often very popular at the time. All art had regards in Christianity, and this is what it was really trying to embody in their art. The religious art style from the Byzantine period carried over to the Christian and Gothic period. Religious art is still prevalent, and it can be seen even in their buildings. Stained glass were often used in churches in order to let light shine through and kind of give a symbolic meaning while people were at church. And cathedrals were built in a different style, having more pointed arches that were better to support more people in order to walk in the church to see the relics that were stored there. Stained glass was very popular, and as we can see, this was probably found in a church because there is religious themes going on here. So we obviously have a religious figure kind of speaking up to an angel who probably has descended from heaven, and we can see that there is a caption towards the bottom, which probably tells in what way this image is related to the Bible and related to Christianity. And we can see kind of this pattern of creations here, which was often very popular in the Gothic times. They often created patterns that were repeated and in different forms in order to create a beautiful visual effect.